Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive.
Hello.
Today we're diving into a very specific piece of source material you shared. It's an email newsletter.
That's right. This one's dated May 28th, 2025. It's from John C. Dvorak and Adam Curry, and it's connected to what the document itself calls no agenda news.
And interestingly, based on the to field we can see in the document, it looks like it landed in the inbox of someone linked to Think and Act locally.
Interesting detail. But yeah, our goal here today is really just to unpack this specific newsletter. What does it tell us?
Exactly. We want to pull out the key points, what topics they were planning to cover in their show, and also, importantly, how this document frames their funding model.
Think of it like a snapshot. What was this particular independent media source focusing on right then, and how do they present their operation? Based only on this document.
Right. Strictly sticking to what's in front of us. So let's jump in. The newsletter gives a heads up about their next show, which was scheduled for Thursday, May 29th, 2025.
And it says they'll be covering events from the past week. Pretty standard stuff so far.
Yeah, and it flags a couple specific things right away. Trump's tariffs and the Iran negotiation. Those are listed as topics.
Okay. So a bit of foreign policy, a bit of trade.
But then, well, the newsletter really dedicates quite a bit of space to some other areas. Seems like these were maybe the bigger points they wanted to hit.
Absolutely. One major section gets into what the newsletter calls a revelation about political strategy.
Yes, this part. It claims the Democrat Party is planning to budget tens of millions.
Tens of millions, yeah.
To pay bloggers and podcasters for promoting the party, essentially.
And the stated objective, as presented in this newsletter, is interesting. It's to claw back large groups of heterosexual men.
Right, and the document uses the term.
Yeah.
CIS, gender heteronormative.
And the newsletter writers draw a contrast here. They set this strategy against how they perceive the party values. Trans and non-binary folks who dislike men and rail against the patriarchy and toxic masculinity. That's the framing in the source.
And it specifically mentions the hosts are skeptical about how this, multi-million-dollar plan would actually work.
Yeah, the document notes their skepticism. So that whole narrative seems like a major discussion point planned for their show based on this newsletter.
Okay, then there's another big topic flagged. This one shifts to public health and politics. It focuses on HHS Secretary Kennedy.
Right. The document claims Kennedy has succeeded in getting the COVID vax removed from some lists, specifically for younger people and pregnant women.
And the newsletter adds its own commentary there, stating these groups should not be getting the vax.
And the authors in this newsletter, they state it's hard to get the mRNA vaccines banned altogether. They claim, quote, the vaccines do not work at all and are dangerous.
Important to stress, that's the specific language and claim within this source document we're looking at.
Exactly. And the narrative this newsletter builds around Kennedy is that there's an all-out smear campaign against him.
Because of his pseudoscience beliefs, is the term used.
Yes. And the document frames it pretty dramatically. It calls it a race against time.
The race to see how far Kennedy gets before something happens. That's the phrase they use.
So quite a loaded perspective presented there, again, in this source material.
Definitely. The newsletter also mentions a new book they plan to discuss.
Yeah, it says one of the hosts got an advanced copy. And the description in the newsletter is that this book really pushes the vaccine to an extreme.
And also, according to this document's description, the book blames all negative publicity on Trump and the Russians.
So that adds another layer to their planned content based on what this newsletter tells us.
Okay, so that covers the main topics highlighted. But the newsletter really shifts gears then to talk about how the show itself operates, financially speaking.
It does, yeah. There's a very prominent call for support and a detailed breakdown of how they say no agenda is funded.
And the language here is quite strong. The document declares no agenda is your true independent media. Big statement.
It really emphasizes that point. It explicitly states the show is not owned by a large corporation nor beholden to advertisers.
The message is very clear, solely supported by you, the listener.
Right. And they contrast this directly with having, quote, creepy advertisers or corporate or communist influencers telling us what to cover and how to slant things.
So they're drawing a sharp line there. And they make an immediate plea for support, linking it to the timing, May 2025, when this was sent.
Yeah, it says this is the month where we must pay infrastructure bills, so a direct call tied to operational costs.
And then it gets really specific about how people can contribute.
It does. It lists several ways. First, just determining an amount and using a credit card via PayPal or Stripe. It mentions links were in the original source.
Okay. And then there's this option, becoming an executive producer.
Yeah, for what the document calls a Hollywood-type credit that is real and forever.
Interesting phrasing. What else?
Sending a check is another option. They give a P.O. Box. P.O. Box 339, El Cerrito, CA 94530.
And they even specify that non-USA checks in foreign currency are okay.
Mm-hmm. And it mentions various systems that will send checks for you, which is a bit vague, but noted in the source.
Then it gets into recurring donations.
Yeah.
Subscriptions, they call them.
Right. And they list specific tiers mentioned right there in the source document. There's the favorite at $33.33 a month.
Uh-huh.
The once popular $11.11 a month.
Okay.
A very popular one at $4 a week, or they calculate it as 75 cents an hour.
Wow. Very detailed breakdown.
And there's also a $50 a month option described as a knighthood layaway for 20 months.
Knighthood layaway.
And finally, it just says an open donation is always welcome too. So lots of options laid out.
Definitely covers a lot of ground on the funding side.
Yeah.
And just quickly, the newsletter structure itself. It mentions sections like memes of the week.
Yeah, and Hypocrite of the Week. The actual content for those wasn't in the part of the source we have, but it shows the newsletter's typical format, gives you a feel for it.
Okay, so stepping back, what does this deep dive into just this one newsletter really tell us?
Well, I think it gives pretty clear insight into what this specific media source, No Agenda News, was prioritizing for their show coverage at that particular moment in time.
Right. We saw those planned discussions, the political strategy narrative about demographics and paying media.
Their stated views and framing around HHS Secretary Kennedy and the COVID vax.
And that description of the new book's perspective on vaccines, blaming Trump and Russia, all drawn directly from this source.
And maybe even more fundamentally, based only on this document, it lays out their financial model and their core philosophy behind it. This strong emphasis on independence through listener support.
Yeah, understanding how a source says it's funded, as described by the source itself, can be really critical, can it? Just as important as what news they cover and how they frame it.
Absolutely. And this document explicitly connects those two things for this particular show. The topics they cover and the way they say they're funded.
So, to sum up our exploration of this specific newsletter, we've seen the topics planned for the No Agenda News show the political strategy claims, the specific takes on Kennedy and the vax the book mentioned, and we've seen the detailed explanation of their listener-funded model, all taken strictly from the content within this single document.
Right. And that leaves us with something interesting to think about, based purely on the claims made in this newsletter.
What's that?
Well, how might the stated independence of a media source, one funded, as they put it, solely by you, potentially influence the kinds of controversial topics it chooses to tackle? And how might it shape the specific way it frames political narratives or its approach to something like public health discussions, especially when you contrast that, as the newsletter itself does, with other funding models like advertisers or corporations?
That's a really good point. How does that funding claim potentially interact with the content choices and the framing we saw described in this source? Definitely something to mull over as you navigate different information streams out there.